My name is André du Plessis. I represent ILGA. ILGA, we are the World Federation of LGBTI organizations with approximately 1,200 member organizations from around 120 countries. We do not claim to speak on behalf of all of these. Indeed, many of our members are either in this room and will speak themselves, or are engaging with you already in other ways, and we fully support that. But we as ILGA do have a role to play in giving a public and clear voice of LGBTI persons from around the world in the spirit of truly global solidarity. So at the outset, we wish to congratulate you and welcome you into this newly created position, Professor Munterborn. We are very grateful that you are also embarking on such an open and transparent consultation process and look forward to working with you not only these days, but in the coming years. As much as we welcome your willingness to listen and learn from all stakeholders, we also recognize your independence as entrusted to you by the states in creating this mandate. And so we will also do whatever we can to protect that independence, and will respect it. In that light of listening, we will seek to share with you our perspectives, perhaps as one person to another, knowing that you will be listening indeed to many different people. And as you continue to listen, we do encourage you, as we are all learning, to actively give a stronger voice to those who are the most marginalized and invisibilized, both in life in general, but also in organizing and in consultations like these. That means persons outside of Geneva and New York. It also means women, intersex persons, non-English speakers, trans persons, lesbians, bisexuals, to name just a few. So in that light, we would like to share with you now some things that we have learned. And perhaps first, some lessons that we learned from the creation of this mandate. I think you and everybody here knows that we worked very hard for the creation of this mandate, and it is no secret that it was no easy journey. Despite the great work that had been carried out by OHCHR and other UN agencies, and we're delighted to see so many today, over many years, the arrangements to protect the human rights of LGBT and intersex persons were inadequate. And there was, until now, no dedicated human rights mechanism at the international level that had a systematic and comprehensive approach to the human rights situation of LGBT persons. As mentioned, accordingly, we worked very hard in strong alliance with people and other civil society from all over the world, over many years, to try and make the establishment of this mandate, which you now hold, a reality. We encouraged governments to lead on the issue and to do what they could to establish the mandate. And as this happened in June of 2016, 628 NGOs from 151 countries called for the creation of the SOGI Independent Expert here at the UN in what was probably the largest joint statement ever by civil society. That mandate was created in a landmark moment, and in the subsequent debates on the mandate, both at the Human Rights Council and then in the General Assembly, the numbers and support for this mandate around the world has only grown. Why this passion? Why did we want this mandate? There are many, many reasons that we wanted it. As you mentioned yesterday, what you've been asked to do is now set out in the resolution that was passed, and it's set out in operational paragraph 3. And I'm not going to read the entirety of operational paragraph 3 to you, but I will highlight a few areas that matter to us. Paragraph 3b, for example, asks you to raise awareness of the violence and discrimination and to identify and address the root causes. For example, the violence faced by lesbians cannot be addressed by simply looking at the physical violence on its own as it occurs. Rather, the violence and discrimination faced by them can only be addressed by digging deep into issues related to the causes of poverty, their invisibility, seen even in the reluctance by so many to use the word lesbian, gender power imbalances, the lack of autonomy over bodies, and the use and abuse of notions of gender to subjugate another. We have to dig deep, and we know that you will. Paragraph D of operational paragraph 3 asks you to address the multiple intersecting and aggravated forms of violence and discrimination faced by persons on the basis of their SOGI. For my organization, this paragraph is key. Recognizing that SOGI issues are connected with a broad range of issues such as gender equality, poverty, class, bodily autonomy, sexual health and rights, and many, many others. So we particularly welcome that you have been mandated to carry out this work in a way that recognizes these multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination. We know from experience, our experience, that this approach is a way to really get to the core of the origin of discrimination and violence, and to give attention to issues that otherwise might just fall outside. And heading back one paragraph to paragraph 3C, this asks you to engage in dialogue with states. And this is so clearly needed as a matter of urgency, especially with those who felt that they could not support the creation of this mandate. When my organization, with others, called for the creation of it, we noted that an independent expert could help depolarize the issue of SOGI by highlighting, for example, that all countries and regions face challenges in addressing violence and discrimination on these grounds, and by highlighting and supporting positive developments as well as addressing the violations. You will now, as part of your work, need to enter into deep, respectful, and wise dialogue with many who find even talking about this difficult. And so yes, dialogue with states. As you engage in this dialogue, we can share just a few lessons on this. After all, LGBTI persons are not only the affected population, we're not only the victims, we are also the experts as change makers with governments and in our communities. And yes, I personally can share lessons of my work here in Geneva and New York, but perhaps better said is that those defenders who live and work in the most hostile and difficult situations are the real experts on how to engage with difficult governments, difficult communities, difficult situations. We know what works and what doesn't in engaging, and we welcome that you have already noted that, for example, government is much larger than just the executive branch or just the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that we often encounter in UN spaces. Many of us are engaged in lifelong change movements where the slow and steady change of hearts and minds of other human beings is at the core of our strategies. We know, often and sadly, that what we work for today will not be realized in our lifetimes. This is a long-term approach. And I know I'm speaking a lot, but I just wish to refer one last to the preambular paragraphs. Because as you dialogue with states within this UN context, Professor Munterborn, we feel that there will be a lot of use in going back to those paragraphs. We fully agree that they do not direct your mandate. That lies in the operational paragraphs. However, these preambular paragraphs are part of the resolution, and they set a tone. As you pointed out in your introduction yesterday, the second preambular paragraph, straight after that reference to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, immediately refers to the Vienna Declaration and Programme of Action, which states that while the significance of national and regional particularities and various historical, cultural, and religious backgrounds must be borne in mind, it is the duty of states, regardless of their political, economic, and cultural systems, to promote and protect all human rights and fundamental freedoms. This is at the core of the human rights framework. That obligation to promote and protect all human rights remain on states, regardless of these cultural and other systems. However, also as mentioned by others yesterday, we should perhaps also look at the other preambular paragraphs, in particular those that were added by states during the voting process. Whether we like them or not, what we hear in these paragraphs and what we as civil society and affected communities hear in our own contexts on the ground are the voiced fears about discussing and embracing discussion on these issues at the UN. Importantly, none of these inserted paragraphs actually mention SOGI, and they focus rather on how the conversation happens and other geopolitical circumstances that surround discussions not only on SOGI but on many other issues. Those who don't know them, those preambular paragraphs focus on a few issues, such as that human rights are for all people and not the few, that attention needs to be given to racism, xenophobia, and other forms of intolerance as much as other issues, that local, traditional, and religious value systems matter, that discussions are also happening at local levels, that external pressures on a country, especially withholding international development aid, is not welcome, that some concepts or notions are not to be discussed internationally, and that states are different from each other. There are fears and concerns expressed behind these paragraphs that are wider than anything about a person's SOGI. We may disagree with some or all of them. We may balk at one or two. But we and many others who engage with those persons who are more cautious on embracing SOGI, we know that these issues come up again and again and again. These paragraphs are therefore not to be ignored, and actually, perhaps are a tool for navigating the more difficult dialogue that you will be engaged in as you seek to carry out your mandate. I wish to emphasize that no LGBTI person chooses by birth to be drawn into these geopolitical discussions. We are, after all, simply human beings, born free and equal in dignity and rights, just like any other human being. I am sure you will continue to focus on this fundamental point as you carry out your mandate over the next few years, and we would suggest that you always focus on the persons, not the issues. After all, the very first preambular paragraph is the UDHR itself, all persons, all. We suggest that when the going gets tough, you keep coming back to the real stories and the clear data and information of the varied forms of violence and discrimination that we as population groups face that dehumanize us, that seek to strip us of our dignity and are clearly illegal under international human rights law. Even as we do not choose to get drawn into geopolitics, we are resilient and engage in these discussions because we are, quite literally, fighting for our lives and for our dignity. We thank you for consulting with us, and we look forward to working with you and supporting you over the coming years.
I would like to thank the representative of ILGA.